Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 11 of our course. This week, we are going to build off some of the concepts of LRAS and AD that we learned last week and introduce the Keynesian view to some of these concepts. So let's start off with a quick review of the two big concepts we learned last week, primarily long run aggregate supply and how that is a vertical line representing the GDP of our country at full employment. We also learned about aggregate demand and the different factors shifting LRAS and AD and the interactions those two different lines have where they meet at equilibrium. Some of the assumptions that we didn't discuss last week that are discussed this week in the classical model are first Say's law. Say's law is this idea in the concept of a supply of a given good within our economy creates its own demand. There's also four different assumptions of the classical model that must be met for the long run aggregate supply and aggregate demand to make sense. These four different assumptions are first, our economy is running in perfect competition. That comes with a lot of different concepts, but the important one is if one manufacturer or producer leaves our economy, it's not going to affect the economy as a whole. Our goods are also homogeneous, meaning you can't differentiate the goods from one supplier to the next. The next assumption is wages and prices are flexible. The third assumption are people act in their own self-interest. And finally, the fourth assumption is they are not fooled by this idea of money illusion. And money illusion is this idea that we understand the relationship between inflation and wages. Or, for example, if our wages go up by 100%, but our goods also go up by 100%, we realize that, hey, we're just as well off as we were before because our inflation of our wages went up, but at the same rate as the goods. So we're not fooled by that illusion of money. This is where Keynes comes in. He says, hey, some of these short-term shocks that we have within our economy can have long-term effects on the total output over time. One of these assumptions is violated, and this primary assumption is that wages and prices are not flexible. So, in this chapter, we're introduced to a new curve to add within our equation. And as you can guess, this new curve will have interactions and consequences with our long-run aggregate supply curve and our aggregate demand curve. This new curve is short-run aggregate supply, keeping in mind that Keynes said these short-run shocks within our economy can have long-term consequences to the aggregate demand as well as the long-run aggregate supply. Traditional Keynesian analysis makes this short-run aggregate supply curve perfectly horizontal. However, in modern analysis, which you'll primarily be dealing with in your homework, the short-run aggregate supply curve has a curve that eventually shifts upward in a curved shape like this. The homework will have you go through the different shifts of short-run aggregate supply, long-run aggregate supply and aggregate demand, and how these different functions affect equilibrium. As you work through the material within this chapter, if you have any questions, as always, let me know. If not, we'll touch base next week. Thanks.